Imagine waking up and for just a terrifying moment, the room tilts in slow motion. You grab the bed frame, just hoping gravity will, pick a direction and stick with it.
Yeah, that feeling.
That really disorienting feeling of dizziness or even full-blown vertigo. It's surprisingly common.
Yeah.
But finding stable ground, literally and diagnostically, that can be a huge challenge for patients and for doctors.
It really is. It's such a complex area. What's particularly fascinating, I think, is that we're not just dealing with one or two things here.
Right.
There are actually more than 24 vestibular disorders, and they all seem to have this uncanny ability to show up with really similar overlapping symptoms.
So it's confusing.
Very. For doctors, it's kind of like trying to solve a puzzle where, honestly, almost every piece looks frustratingly alike.
Yeah, and that really brings home the stakes, right? This diagnostic confusion, it has, real consequences.
Absolutely.
Patients often end up on what feels like this expensive diagnostic scavenger hunt.
Yeah.
Hopping between specialists, getting misdiagnosed again and again.
And that delay.
Well, that delay in treatment just fuels anxiety, naturally. And for hospitals, it means valuable time wasted on follow-ups that maybe wouldn't have been needed if things were clearer up front.
Exactly. And, in the world of AI medical diagnosis, which is moving so fast, we've seen amazing breakthroughs, right? Like in radiology, dermatology. But these vestibular disorders, they've stayed, well, stubbornly elusive. Until now, maybe?
Why is that? Why have they been so hard for AI?
Well, the reasons have been pretty consistent, actually. Too many symptoms that look like each other, like you said. Yeah, this is really interesting work.
And they seem to have, kind of flipped that whole narrative. So our mission today is to unpack how they pulled it off.
Yeah.
How they got this impressive accuracy with a hybrid AI-human approach. And maybe even more importantly, how they've laid out what looks like a practical blueprint for actually integrating AI into healthcare safely, effectively.
You can almost think of it like the Sullenberger analogy.
Okay.
The AI, it takes on the role of the autopilot, right? Handling the cruise altitude, all that complex, maybe repetitive data crunching.
Right.
But the human specialist, the pilot, they keep a hand firmly on the yoke for those critical moments. Takeoff, landing, unexpected turbulence, where human judgment, that nuance, that experience,
Yeah.
it's just irreplaceable.
I like that analogy. The AI assists, but the human is still in command, especially when things get tricky.
Precisely.
Okay, so we've laid out the problem. Why are these vestibular disorders such a particularly tough nut to crack, even for experienced doctors? What makes them sort of break traditional checklists?
Well, like you said earlier, they just love to masquerade as each other. It's like a diagnostic costume party happening inside your inner ear.
Yeah.
Doctors are juggling a ton of information. There's the intricate international classification of vestibular disorders, specific migraine criteria, hearing test results, and often, let's be honest, a patient's pretty shaky recollection of exactly what happened when.
Right. Memory can be fuzzy when you feel awful.
Totally. And it's not unusual for just one person's story, their description, to basically spawn 21 separate data points a doctor has to somehow synthesize.
Wow. 21 points from one story. That's a lot to process, especially clinic after clinic, patient after patient.
It is, day in, day out. So it makes perfect sense why those earlier AI attempts kind of stumbled, right?
Yeah, I remember hearing they often topped out at 5 disorders or something.
Yeah.
Because the sample sizes were too small and they had this overfitting problem.
Exactly. Overfitting just killed the real-world appeal. It was like, a student memorizing specific examples but then flunking the test with slightly different questions.
They couldn't generalize.
Precisely. Those models learned the noise, the quirks in the small data set, instead of the real underlying patterns. But this new study from Seoul, it seems to rewrite those rules, and it starts with data, just on a whole different scale.
Okay, let's get into that, because this next part, for me, this is where you really see how they did it differently. The Seoul team's breakthrough, it kicks off with this massive beta set. We're talking 3,349 patient records, carefully selected, trimmed down from a decade of visits at Seoul National University Hospital.
That's a serious amount of clinical history.
It's a huge foundation. And they specifically trained their model to classify 6 of the most common and often trickiest heavy hitter disorders.
Right, the big ones.
Yeah. Benign paroxysmal positional vertigo, BPPV, vestibulopathy, VSFT, vestibular migraine, VM, hemodynamic orthostatic dizziness, HOD, Ménière's disease, MD, and persistent postural perceptual dizziness, PPPD.
Yes, and crucially, they didn't just dump all that raw data into the machine and hope for the best. No. They started with about 145 potential questions or data points the AI could look at. But then they carefully pruned them down to just 50 clinically vetted features.
Clinically vetted. Though not just statistically significant, but relevant in practice.
Exactly. This is where the human touch was absolutely critical. They called it lived experience coaching. They had 2 veteran specialists, experienced clinicians, review every single feature, and they basically vetoed anything that looked clinically irrelevant.
So it wasn't just about what the algorithms thought was important based on math, but what actual doctors with years of seeing patients knew mattered for a real diagnosis. That feels like a huge difference.
It absolutely is. And they were really clear about this in the study. They said, a quote, "Our accuracy dropped to 80% whenever we removed those clinician-picked features."
80%. That's a massive drop.
It's huge. Just hammers home the point. Data alone is powerful, but expert context remains irreplaceable. These experts specifically flag things like orthostatic symptoms, symptoms when you stand up, or auditory symptoms, hearing-related issues, initial episode details, because they know from experience those are the critical clues for getting it right in the clinic.
Okay, so that human insight shapes the data the AI sees, but they still needed the right algorithm, right? That Goldilocks balance you mentioned, something that wouldn't overfit, which one did they settle on?
That ended up being CatBoost. It's interesting because other models, like, say, Random Forest, might have looked amazing initially, like Herculean 98% accuracy on the validation set.
Wow, 98.
Yeah, but then those models face-planted to 85% on fresh data. Classic overfitting.
Okay.
CatBoost, though, it delivered a really steady 93% on validation and then held up with a solid 88.4% on a completely blind test with new data. That tells you it's consistent, it's reliable for real-world use.
88% is still really impressive for such a complex area.
It really is,
Yeah.
especially given the challenges.
Okay, so CatBoost is the co-pilot. Let's walk through this new hybrid flight plan. How does this actually look for, say, you, the patient, walking into a clinic using the system?
Right. So it starts right at check-in. Instead of maybe a long interview right off the bat, you'd likely use a tablet or maybe a kiosk. And you'd answer those 50 questions, but they're designed to be in plain language, user-friendly.
Okay, that sounds pretty efficient. Streamline things for the patient up front, then what?
Then the CatBoost model instantly processes those answers, and it spits out the top 2 diagnostic probabilities. So it gives the doctor a likely diagnosis plus a strong second possibility to consider.
And this is where the human comes back in strong, right?
Yeah.
The physician review part.
Exactly. The specialist looks at those probabilities. Now, if the AI's top suggestion matches their own initial gut feeling or assessment,
They can move faster.
yeah, they can proceed much more quickly. They can focus their valuable time on, say, the physical exam, specific tests, or just talking through the nuances with the patient.
But what if there's a mismatch? If the AI says one thing and the doctor thinks another?
That's just as valuable. If there's a discrepancy, the doctor knows exactly where to dig deeper, maybe ask some targeted follow-up questions based on the AI's reasoning.
Okay.
And critically, any of those misaligned cases where the human and AI ultimately disagree, they get fed back into this feedback loop.
For retraining.
Exactly. It helps retrain the model, making the whole system smarter and more accurate over time. It learns from its mistakes, essentially.
That seems like it would save a ton of time in a busy clinic setting. The study actually quantified this, didn't it? Something about interview time.
It did. They found it cut the initial interview time from around 17 minutes down to roughly 7.
10 minutes per patient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they calculated that could recover about an hour of clinic time across a typical morning shift. That's huge for patient access, for throughput.
Definitely a big impact. But efficiency is one thing, safety is another, especially in medicine.
Absolutely critical. And the study is very, very clear on this. Speed is secondary, safety is king.
How do they ensure that? How do they build in safety?
Well, they carefully tune the system. They made sure it leans conservative where the stakes are high. So, for example, it might have slightly lower sensitivity for something like Ménière's disease.
Okay.
But its high specificity means it's much more likely to raise a cautious eyebrow and prompt further testing rather than giving a potentially false sense of certainty. The goal is to avoid missing something serious, like potential hearing loss associated with MD.
So it flags uncertainty rather than guessing wrong on high-risk conditions.
Precisely. And similarly for PPPD, persistent postural perceptual dizziness, it's tuned to avoid overdiagnosing, which could lead people down the path of, say, unnecessary psychiatric consultations if it's not actually PPPD.
That's really reassuring. It's not about the AI making some final, unchallengeable verdict. It's about helping the doctor make the right call safely.
Exactly. They explicitly stated their core philosophy was, our goal was to avoid invasive interventions driven by algorithmic overconfidence.
Algorithmic overconfidence. That's a great phrase.
Yeah.
It's about augmenting the clinician.
Yeah.
Right. Empowering them, not replacing their judgment.
That's the core idea. Augmentation, not replacement.
So, okay, we see the time savings, the safety focus. How does this co-pilot really, shine in different real-world settings beyond just that specialist clinic?
Well, they see it being useful in basically 3 distinct scenarios. First, yes, in the dedicated vestibular specialist clinic, there, patient histories can be really long and detailed.
Right.
So the tablet intake and that AI snapshot free up the specialist to really hone in on the physical exam, the nuanced findings like subtle eye movements, things like that.
Makes sense. What about outside the specialist's office, like my primary care doctor or maybe even an ER physician? They aren't typically vestibular experts.
And that's the second scenario, where it acts as a kind of diagnostic guardrail.
Guardrail? How
Sure.
so?
For non-specialists, it can nudge them. It might suggest they consider a less obvious diagnosis, maybe vestibular migraine, when their first thought might have been BPPV, or the other way around, based purely on the symptoms the patient reported. It basically broadens their diagnostic thinking, helping them catch things they might otherwise miss.
Okay, that could be really helpful. And the third scenario, you mentioned helping patients navigate the system better, cutting down on that feeling of being bounced around.
Yeah, the idea is eventually maybe an app version could help you, the patient, with self-navigation. It could intelligently suggest the best first department to visit based on your answer.
Potentially cutting down on those endless referral loops.
Exactly. Getting you to the right type of care faster, reducing that frustration of feeling lost. Ultimately, this whole approach starts to move AI medical diagnosis from just a buzzword to actual practical utility.
Right.
It handles the admin chores, the triage, the pre-screening that take up so much valuable clinical time right now.
This really brings us back to that core idea you mentioned earlier, the centaur medicine.
Hmm?
Clinicians and algorithms running in tandem. But the study pointed out some specific, maybe even surprising, advantages of this synergy, didn't it? Beyond just being efficient.
It did. 3 things really stood out about this collaboration. First, what they call contextual error checking.
Okay.
So the algorithm might spot a pattern, maybe a rare one, suggesting Meniere's disease as a possibility.
Right.
But then the human doctor double-checks the audiogram, the hearing test results. That provides the essential context that might show, nope, that doesn't fit, averting a false positive. The human adds that critical layer of real-world verification.
Got it. The algorithm flags, the human verifies with other data. What else?
Second is that adaptive learning loop we touched on.
The feedback loop.
Yeah. Every time a doctor flags a mismatch, AI said X, but the final diagnosis was Y, that information goes back to retrain the model. That real-world feedback is absolutely crucial for the system to keep improving and stay relevant.
Makes sense. Continuous improvement based on actual clinical practice. And the third synergy.
This one's maybe softer, but incredibly important. Patient trust.
Yes.
People just trust technology more in a healthcare setting when a clinician stands beside it. They feel heard, not processed.
That feels intuitively right.
Yeah, and the paper really emphasizes this. It says directly, it is crucial to recognize that the model is intended to complement rather than replace the expertise of medical professionals.
So, summing it up.
Basically, AI offers the probabilities based on the data. Doctors apply wisdom, context, and that vital human connection.
Okay, that's a powerful combination. Now, every good study acknowledges its limitations, and this one was no different. The Seoul team was pretty upfront about them, right?
Very transparent. They mentioned things like, yes, the data came from a single center, that Korean hospital, which naturally raises questions about potential cultural bias or maybe linguistic nuances in how symptoms are described.
Sure.
They also noted the limited scope, only those 6 disorders for now, and the fact that it was a retrospective study, looking back at old records.
And what about solutions? Did they propose ways to address these?
They did, and importantly, they proposed clear, practical solutions. For the single center and bias issue, they're planning multi-center and multinational validation studies using multilingual questionnaires.
Ah, testing it elsewhere.
Exactly. To tackle the rare disorders in limited scope, they're looking at techniques like data augmentation and just generally expanding the data set to cover more conditions beyond these first 6.
And what about keeping it accurate over time? You mentioned data drift earlier.
Yeah.
How do they plan to handle that?
Absolutely essential point. Their proposed protocol involves quarterly retraining using fresh patient data.
Every 3 months.
Yeah. Because medical realities can shift subtly, right?
Right.
Maybe new flu strains change symptom patterns slightly, or dietary habits in a region affect certain conditions. Regular retraining is crucial to make sure that 88% accuracy doesn't slowly degrade as the real world evolves around it.
That makes sense. Constant vigilance. What about the regulatory side? Getting something like this approved for actual clinic use could be a long road.
It can be, but in Korea, their regulatory body, the MFDS, tends to view these kinds of AI supportive tools as software as a medical device, or SAMD.
SAMD, okay.
And that classification often means a somewhat easier path to approval, precisely because the final diagnostic decision always rests with the human doctor. The AI is assisting, not deciding. We'd likely see similar thinking from, say, the FDA here, once those multi-center trials confirm it works reliably elsewhere.
But thinking globally, even with multilingual questionnaires, one hospital's data, even a huge amount, has those cultural fingerprints, as you put it. How do they make this truly generalizable? How does a Seoul model work well in Rome or New York?
That's the big challenge, the global generalizability. How people describe dizziness can vary. So besides the multilingual questionnaires, their plan involves something called federated learning.
Federated learning.
Yeah, it allows the model to learn from diverse data sets held at partner clinics, maybe in Europe and North America, without actually centralizing all that sensitive patient data in one place. The model learns locally, and only the learning updates are shared. It's a huge advantage for privacy.
That sounds really smart. So this hybrid approach, this template, it feels like it could be powerful well beyond just dizziness. Where else might this model apply?
The researchers themselves definitely see it that way. They view it as a potential blueprint for tackling other really complex diagnostic challenges. Think about areas like chronic fatigue syndrome.
Yeah, notoriously difficult.
Exactly, or autoimmune flares, certain oncology situations, cardiology questions, maybe even some areas of psychiatry. The transferable lessons seem clear. Find a tricky but well-defined area, combine smart algorithms with that lived experience, curation from experts, really focus on being accurate for high-risk conditions, and always, always deliver probabilities, not final verdicts. Let the human make the call.
And spinning this around, for the people running the hospitals, the administrators, the CFOs, this isn't just about better medicine. There's a concrete business case here too, right? Tangible wins.
Oh, absolutely. They highlight some really compelling numbers. Remember that cutting 10 minutes from each dizzy consult?
Yeah, frees up an hour a morning.
Which translates to potentially an extra 9 patient slots per clinic day. That's direct increased capacity, potentially more revenue, better access.
Okay, that's significant. What else? Did they mention reduced referrals? Helping with those long wait times for specialists.
That's another key benefit they anticipate. If primary care docs feel more confident handling the more straightforward cases with this AI assist,
they refer less.
Exactly. It could significantly ease the burden on specialists and shorten those frustrating wait lists. Plus, they mentioned early pilot surveys showing a 17-point bump in Net Promoter Score.
Wow, patient satisfaction went up that much.
Apparently so. Patients felt heard, got answers faster. That's huge for a hospital's reputation. And then there's the direct cost savings. Fewer unnecessary MRIs. Fewer expensive tests means real money saved. These are the kinds of results that can persuade cautious hospital boards to actually invest in and adopt AI tools like this.
Okay, so we've got accuracy, safety, efficiency, a solid business case. But ultimately, especially in healthcare, it really comes down to trust, doesn't it?
Always.
Why does trust sometimes lag behind the accuracy numbers? And how do we get to that point of maybe not 100%, but deep trust from both doctors and patients?
I think it boils down to transparency and explainability. Both patients and doctors need to understand why the AI is suggesting something, not just what it's suggesting.
The reasoning behind it.
Exactly. And the vision they paint for a near-future clinic visit really illustrates this nicely. Imagine, you, the patient, you check in, maybe answer about 30 adaptive questions on your phone or a tablet. Takes a few minutes.
And then?
The AI engine instantly generates this concise, maybe one-page brief for your doctor. It wouldn't just say BPPV likely. I might read something like, likely BPPV 72%, vestibular migraine 18%, other 10%.
So probabilities.
Probabilities, and crucially, maybe the top 3 contributing features. Head turn trigger reported, episode length under 1 minute, absence of hearing loss noted.
So the doctor sees the why.
Exactly. The doctor then uses that brief, talks it through with you, maybe does a quick confirming bedside test like the Dix-Hall-Pike maneuver for BPPV, and you both agree on the plan. Maybe you skip that MRI you were worried about because you found the answer quickly, collaboratively, and transparently.
That sounds like a much better experience. Trust is built, costs are saved, time is used better.
Exactly. The science of medicine gets advanced through intelligent collaboration.
This whole deep dive, it really drives home that AI in medicine isn't this zero-sum game of man versus machine that people sometimes fear.
Not at all.
It really is, as they put it so well, a well-rehearsed duet. The algorithms do the heavy lifting, pattern recognition, data sifting. The clinicians wield the irreplaceable things: context, ethics, empathy, judgment.
And if you connect that to the bigger picture, think about the pressures on healthcare systems.
Workforce shortages, rising chronic disease.
Right. This kind of model offers a really pragmatic, powerful way for hospitals to cope. It manages to honor the art of medicine while scaling the science in a way that helps everyone: patients, doctors, the system itself.
So it provides a pretty optimistic answer to that question you sometimes hear whispered in hospital corridors, the one a lot of people worry about. Will AI replace us?
Yeah, the resounding answer from this kind of work seems to be a hopeful no. It suggests AI will fly beside us, like that co-pilot, trimming the turbulence, handling the routine, and freeing up every doctor to spend more time where machines still really struggle, which is in that essential, complex human conversation.
That's a great way to put it. Okay, before we wrap up, maybe a final thought for our listeners to chew on. This centaur approach, this blend of human intuition, lived experience, refining powerful algorithms, where else could it make a difference? Beyond medicine, how might this idea where human expertise actively guides the AI transform other really complex data-heavy fields, maybe legal analysis, environmental science, even creative industries? Something to think about.